Welcome to the Retail Tech Podcast, where we talk about the full spectrum of technologies and implementation used in omnichannel and online retail. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at retailtechpodcast.com, and we always look forward to your feedback. Today I'm speaking with Rodrigue Schafer from Zalando, which is one of Europe's largest e-commerce companies. Rodrigue is a head of engineering at Zalando. How are you today, Rodrigue?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I was very interested to speak with you because of the work that is being done over at Zalando on microservices. Can you give me a brief background on how you yourself got involved in microservices?
Okay, so actually at Zalando, this is a journey we started roughly 1.5 years ago. We've seen in the past that our bigger monolithic applications basically restricted us with regards to our scalability, both functional and non-functional, our productivity, and also our innovation. So we thought about a new way to organize ourselves, and we created a new form of organization which we call radical agility. And radical agility is not only the organization, but it's also a view on the architecture of our systems. And this architecture, for that we chose a microservice approach. So when we kicked off the whole change process of going towards radical agility and microservice, our journey started. From that point on, I was personally involved in doing this change in the fashion store department, which is actually the online shop. And we're not finished yet with all of the change we want to do, but we're quite far in the journey now.
Okay, and are you mostly using Java?
Our older systems, our legacy systems, were actually based on Java. Nowadays, teams have the option to choose the language which is the best fit for the job. So we see a quite heterogeneous landscape here. Some teams are using Java, others are using Scala. We have a lot of teams using Node.js, for example. We have Go in the live environment. So we have a couple of different programming languages.
Okay, so that's probably one of the first questions that came to my mind, and I've seen other people ask it, is that how when you have teams deciding what the language is that they're going to use, how do you manage the consistency of the code across the organization, and then as well as training and keeping up and staffing, recruiting, making sure the team is staffed completely? Like if somebody leaves with a very unique skill, it doesn't hurt the organization.
Yeah. So let's start with a part of this question. For one, consistency. We have with the microservice approach, we have actually tech agnostic services. So what the service itself, what it's built from, doesn't really matter to the outside. We have an API, which actually serves as an interface to other services. And that's why we don't really need this homogeneous landscape with that regard. What we make sure here to have consistent APIs across the whole organization, across the whole of tech. And for that, we've created an API guild, which actually reviews APIs before anything gets implemented. So that's one way to achieve this consistency. From the point of view of how teams choose their programming language, we have established a tech radar. It's similar to the one from ThoughtWorks. So we're actually looking at all the different technologies out there. This is not only programming languages. This is also about, let's say, for example, data storages and stuff like this. So we rate these technologies and we give advice to teams based on multiple aspects. So we look at how easy it is to build things with that language, how much support the tech organization can give to a team. We have a very strong Java community in Zalando. So if you're building something with Java, you're pretty sure to find help if something goes wrong, right? If you're building it in some niche programming language, then you're more or less on your own. So we consider all of these things and then give out advice on which technology to adapt and which to rather not use, or which are, let's say, more experimental in nature.
Okay, so there is some organized orchestration going on. It's not like totally up to the developer to do whatever they want.
Right. And also a team should have good arguments for the choice of technology. So it's not a complete free-for-all. Teams need to explain why a certain language is better suited to the task than another. Right? We have in our split leadership model, we have the delivery lead, who's actually there to also challenge decisions like this and to nudge the team to think about all options which are out there and then make an informed decision rather than a decision of, hey, I personally like that language and that's why we choose that. The other one other part of your question was that how we can actually mitigate the risk of important knowledge leaving the team, right? So if we're building, let's say, something with Go, and there's only one person in the team who actually knows that language, and this person leaves, then of course the team has a problem. And we also coach the teams to think about these things. So it's the team's responsibility in the end to maintain the code. One person leaving should not impact this capability.
Okay. What is a typical size of a team?
Typical size, I would say it's around 7 engineers.
Okay, so is it all engineers, or there is like product people in there as well, or?
Yeah, usually a team also has a producer, which is a role which we see in engineering, and it's somewhat a little bit Scrum Master, a little bit product owner in the sense of Scrum, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to that producer, we have the product specialists who are actually doing the product work itself. So coming up with the purpose, the why we're building things, and the engineers will then come up with the how.
And then if it has anything to do with, for example, the user experience, how is that managed within the whole? Because, I mean, it has to fit the rest of the site, right?
That's correct. So besides the product organization and the engineering organization, we also have, as part of the bigger product organization, UX role. And this role makes sure that things fit together. So actually, we do not have enough people in UX, but we tend to assign user experience designers to teams who are working on customer-facing applications.
Okay, so what was that? Was that a call, a recruiting call right there, that you are looking for more UX people?
Oh, we were definitely still looking for more UX people. It was not a recruiting call. It's just that we have started building up this part of this role in the organization, and we're still building it up, right?
Yeah, well, I think in an organization like Zalando, you're probably always looking for good people in different roles.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, so let me ask you this. How do you handle security and privacy aspects in a really distributed environment like this?
Hmm. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I'm actually not really a specialist in this, but what I can say is that when you're looking at typical monolithic applications, what people tend to do is basically they wall this application in. So they're building firewalls, they're building a lot of stuff so that nobody can break into their system. This doesn't actually work in a microservice environment. So every service itself is usually more or less publicly accessible and needs to take care of security itself. In the walled garden approach, usually the systems inside this walled garden do not have a lot of security measures, right? Because they rely on the wall to not let anybody in. So that's something where we also invested quite a lot of time to make sure that our microservices are in fact secure.
Okay. Yeah, because the data definitely has to be secure. The code itself maybe not as critical, but the data definitely has to be secure, especially in an e-commerce environment. Now, what about if I'm sure Zalando has a mobile app. I haven't seen it myself because I'm in the US. I'm not sure if I can actually access it. But if you were looking at like just a complete native mobile development, you have to use APIs anyway between the front end and the back end. Um, does that make it easier to actually implement a microservices architecture across the organization when you're like focused on a mobile development?
Well, so for one, I think even if you're working with microservice landscape there and mobile, you would still like to build something what is called a backend for front end. So actually one API service which sort of bundles calls to the different microservices in the backend and presents them in a form that the mobile app can consume more easily, right? So imagine you have like the product detail part of your app open, and there is a lot of information there, right? So you have, for example, stock, you have price, you have available sizes and all of this. And in the microservice landscape, this information would actually come from different services, right? That would mean that if you're directly accessing these services, your app would need to make multiple calls to gather all this information, which is not really good because if you're doing it on the street, you might not have a lot of connectivity there. So making a lot of calls is bad for an app. So that's why it's good to bundle this and provide this with one API service to the apps.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yes, I mean definitely connectivity is an issue, and the more calls you make to the back end, the more you're susceptible to something breaking. So
Yeah, it's also right, and it's faster to just provide one aggregated, let's say, set of data to the app to just consume.
okay. Yeah, in that case, so for example, in my own company, the question for us is between the amount of data that you're getting in one endpoint versus getting smaller chunks in multiple endpoints. So that's always an argument that we go back and forth on is like, if I can get one endpoint to completely, um, you know, populate the entire screen, uh, is that better even if I don't use all of that data in one screen? Or so I think that's what you're probably something that you're also referring to.
Yeah, in the app space, definitely. Yeah.
Right. So now, how many people actually are there in the entire organization, the software development organization, if you can tell me?
Yeah, so the latest number is roughly 1,600 people working in tech at Zalando. So
Okay,
um, it's at least the
that's a
last official number.
that's a good sized team. Yes. The now are all of them? You know, as you said, you know, this whole transition started about a year and a half ago. How long do you think it is before the entire organization is going to switch over and be fully MSA compliant or practicing?
Yeah, that's probably a question which many people here would like to know the answer to. So I um, I cannot give a definite answer here. I think that we will make a very uh, considerable progress next year. Um, but if we're done in 2017, I cannot really say because I mean, I don't have a complete picture view on everything what is going on with these 1,600 people here. So
Right.
I can only say for the stuff I'm mostly working on that we will definitely make major progress.
Okay. So is the management structure also organized differently in an MSA organization than a typical monolith? You know, for like a monolith, you could have people that are responsible for different functionalities within the monolith. In the MSA organization, is it the same or is it somewhat different?
Well, what we try to establish is end-to-end responsibility for the teams, right? So that they cover not only the back-end parts, but also the front end. Um, I'm
Okay.
not, I wouldn't really say that this is tied to the microservice approach. So when we changed a lot our own organization, one thing we did also was put a lot of emphasis on autonomy of teams, right? Um, which fits to, let's say, the clearly bounded microservices they care for. But yeah, it's a tough question.
Okay. So just you know, thinking about your own role as an engineering director, do you manage actually like specific features or like you own a one or two or five functionalities end to end? Is that how it's broken down?
Okay. So teams are tied to certain products. You can say that. So, for example, we have a PDP team, we have a checkout team, right? We have teams which have very strong identification with the product they are building. So that's how we structured it. And with regards to, for example, the PDP team, they take care about everything what they need to do on the backend side to make sure they can show the necessary data to the customer, and they are also building the front end. But so if your question targets more feature teams versus product teams, is that what you're looking
Right,
at?
right. So PDP, for example, depending on the size and the number of people and the different things inside of that, could have its own director that's completely owns that entire function. That's what I was wondering. Or, for example, checkout, or search, or payment.
Yeah. Yeah, so these areas are actually they differ in size quite significantly here. Payment is, for example, its own company. So actually, they have their own engineering head there, and They have their own product. It's a real company. We have Search, which is part of a new personalization and search department, and they also have their own leadership structure on top of that. In the case of PDP and checkout and catalog and navigation, this is all part of the fashion store department, of which I'm head right now. And there it's let's say per bigger product inside the online shop, there is one team taking care of that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Thank you. So one of the questions that I've heard is that MSA microservices are definitely a lot easier to get into when you're a larger development team. But for startups, for example, and I know that I saw from your background you have been involved in a few of them. What do you think? What advice would you give people that are just starting up a new company? They have a team of maybe 2 people. Do you recommend them to start looking into at least preparing and setting the groundwork for being a microservices organization?
From my personal opinion, it's not a good idea to do that from the start, actually, because building a microservice system landscape is a heavy investment. So it's harder to operate and maintain, right? It's harder to actually get started with it. You need a lot of very sophisticated tooling. For example, you need a very, very good monitoring. You need very easy provisioning and deployment to make this happen. And usually when you're just starting out, you don't have set up all of these tools yet. So I would not recommend it for startups, especially because startups, they should invest more into bringing an MVP live and proving their business model before they invest heavily in tech, right?
Right. Okay. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. Why build a castle when you don't have an army yet? So,
right.
Or something like that.
Exactly.
So, okay. Now, what on more on the management side? How do you handle documentation of work and maybe project management? Do you have specific teams that handle those in a grid environment, or is it all embedded into each team?
So it really depends on what to document. So let's start with project management. We have a group of project managers who have created templates for how to track bigger projects and communication templates and all of this stuff. So this is there, and this is sort of becoming a standard. Regarding APIs, we have a centralized place where you can look into the APIs and the documentation.
Do you use products like Slack or things like that for communication, or HipChat, or?
Oh yeah, right now for communication between teams and individuals, most of tech is currently using HipChat.
Okay. And I think sometimes you can even use those tools for even information storage, but they're not really designed for that. So that's a pet peeve of mine, is documentation. So I ask everybody about that to see what they do.
Yeah, it really differs. So, for example, we have a couple of bigger projects which are also open source, and these projects created their own sites for documentation, right?
Okay.
So it's
like a wiki, or
no, yeah, well, not really a wiki. Imagine it like some sort of product website with some documentation on it.
Oh, okay. their own internal website, basically.
No, they're public, so it's
Oh,
not
they're
even.
actually public. Okay, okay. So just switching over for just a few more minutes on general e-commerce trends in Europe. Would you be able to tell me a little bit about what you think are going to be like the next really evolving factors or features that you think are going to come down, be implemented in the next 12 months? Anything different, anything like significantly different or noticeably different?
Yeah, it's a question where I'm not really sure how much I can tell about our plans here.
Not your plans, just in general. What are things that are popular, for example, in Europe? Because in the U.S. we tend to focus on our own things a lot, and I know that Europe is actually some parts of Europe are a lot even more advanced in handling things. For example, chat commerce or things like that, I know are more advanced in Asia.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's anything specific in Europe, as far as even from a user's point of view.
So one thing which we're investing a lot right now is actually personalization. So in our situation here, we have a huge catalog. We have, I think, roughly 200,000 items in our catalog, which is quite overwhelming for our customers. So what we want to do is want to actually create personalization in a way that's so good that it's tailored to every single customer, right? So that's one thing which is very important for us, and we also seen other companies going in that direction in the recent time. What we're also seeing is that the importance of machine learning increases in this space, right? So we have a tech hub in Dublin, which also focuses on that, and which also allows us then to give, let's say, better recommendations, better information about the products to the customer.
Okay, yeah, those are pretty important. I mean, machine learning and AI, you can't really do optimized and effective personalization without having some advances in those things. So I think they all go hand in hand. What about delivery? Is the same day delivery becoming really popular in Europe? I mean, I'm sure it's different in different countries.
Yeah, true. This is something we're actually trying out, and we've built an app which is focused on that actually, and had it live in a couple of bigger cities to see how it works. So yeah, this is something we're also investigating.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, I know that we're coming up on time, and I know I asked you a few questions that I had not sent before, so I really appreciate you also answering those. I'm definitely going to watch out and very interested in seeing how things develop at Zalando with microservices. And if you have any other developments that come up, please feel free to have your media team contact me. I'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, no problem. I also there is a talk I did about microservices at Zalando on YouTube.
Okay. Can you send me the link?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rodrigue. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.